So we stop at UI notifications for the publish and subscribe pattern. Now we'll continue with the decoupling applications using Ben Alman's pub sub implementation. And then maybe after this we're gonna stop here with the mediator pattern and then continue with a React. So we're gonna jump in a framework for us to better understand what we're actually doing here because it's becoming more abstract. So with React, after that we're gonna discuss basics of JavaScript. So that's where we go to the actual syntax. So right now we're discussing the pattern. So the decoupling application using Ben Alman's PubSub implementation. In the following example, we'll use a Ben Alman's jQuery implementation of publish or subscribe to demonstrate how we can decouple a UI. So in JavaScript before, the way we write code is through jQuery. That's actually how we render before these frameworks. So this is actually what we do, what they do to be able to decouple UI. Notice how submitting a rating only has the effect of publishing the fact that the new user and rating data is available. So submitting a rating only has the effect of publishing it or publishing the fact that new user and rating data is available. It's left to the subscribers to those topics to delegate what happens with that data. So this submitting is kind of like the submit or the publish in the event channel, and then it's up to the subscriber to subscribe to those topics to delegate what happens with that data. In our case, we're pushing that new data into existing arrays and rendering them using the Lodash libraries, that template method for templating. So this Lodash, the array is basically how we usually configure objects in JavaScript, even in React or modern frameworks. So this is fundamental to learn, as we will see in the React and JavaScript basics. So here we have script with an ID user template type text-html, then li, and then name li closing script, and then another script with an ID ratings template, then type equal text-html, then li strong, then title closing strong was rated rating, then closing script, div id equal container. Now this is the container of that. We have a class sample form, and then p label for Twitter handle, and then input, and then closing p, and then another paragraph with a label and input child. So label for equal movie scene, name a movie you've seen this year, and then input type text id movie scene, and then closing p. Send another label, so for equal movie rating, attribute rate the movie you saw, then closing label, and then select with an id movie rating, and then option value 1, so this is the rating, and then select closing p, then button p. So as you can see, we created a code imperatively. So in React, we will actually minimize a lot of these actions or steps by creating code declaratively. So div class equals summary table, div so another below that is another div class equals summary table, next time div id equals users, and then recent users, then div id ratings equal recent movies rated, and then closing div. So here this is the JavaScript code used to be able to contact that. So this is the pre-compiled templates and cache. Then using closure, so Cons, so we have an arrow function here, $arrow, cons user template equal underscore that template with the parameter hashtag user template, which is what we have in the first script, and then .html. Next then const rating template equal dash that template ratings template .html. Then subscribe to the new user topic, which adds a user to a list of users who have submitted reviews. Now $subscribers parameter slash new slash user comma e comma data arrow function if parameter data inside this $sign hashtag users that append parameter user template parameter data closing. Subscribe to the new rating topic. This is composed of a title and rating. New ratings are appended to a running list of added user ratings. So this is the subscribe. That's how you will subscribe to this event. It's composed of a title and rating. The new ratings are appended to a running list of added user ratings. Now that subscribe parameter slash new slash rating comma parameter e data arrow function if data then ratings that append that ratings, and then next is a handler for adding a new user. So $sign hashtag add on click comma e that prevent default const str user Twitter handle const str movie equal movie underscore scene const star rating, etc. And then inform the application a new user is available. So a $sign that publish new slash user, the name str user. The next line inform the app new rating is available. Then $sign that publish slash new slash rating. The next line title str movie, then rating str rating, then closing, and then jQuery as kind of like second parameter or dependency array when we talk about React. So this is important because as we see, it's complex to write code before. That's also the reason why React was invented. So that's the main purpose. Why writing in React is actually a privilege. The coupling an AJAX-based jQuery application. So in our example, we'll take a practical look at how decoupling our code using publish / sub early in the development process can save us potentially painful refactoring later. Additionally, with this pattern is that these Lodash, these are being taught early in the beginner, but you don't actually need this when learning React, but you'll definitely have to dig deep into it, like go back into it after, because JavaScript is React. Okay, so you need to go back to JavaScript again and again. And at the same time is that this pattern is what they have been using to be able to make this process of writing extremely complex code in JavaScript. Now decoupling the AJAX. So now since we use the jQuery, we're gonna look into AJAX and then jQuery. So we're gonna combine that. How do we actually decouple that using pub / sub early in the development, and how it will help us save painful refactoring later. So often in Ajax heavy application, we want to achieve more than just one unique action once we receive a response to a request. So we want a unique action to a response to a request. So we could add all of the post request logic into a successful callback, but there are drawbacks to this approach. Highly coupled applications sometimes increase the effort required to reuse functionality due to the increased interfunction or code dependency. So if your application is highly coupled, there is an increased effort to the reuse or reusing the functionality because it becomes tightly coupled. So you ended up having to reuse the dependencies of the dependency that you want to reuse instead of just instead of just importing the required dependency, because if it is highly coupled. So keeping our post request logic hard coded in a callback may be okay if we just try to grab a result set once. However, it's not as appropriate when we want to make further AJAX calls to the same data source. And different end behavior without rewriting parts of the code multiple times. So if you keep the logic in the actual callback, which we will discuss how do we actually like process callback handler in React part. So if we want like to keep that logic, it might be okay if we're doing that once, but it's not as appropriate when we want to make further AJAX calls or to further like calls to the same data source and different end behavior without rewriting parts of the code multiple times. So it's not possible or it's not efficient to like put that logic in the actual callback. So rather than going back through each layer that calls the same data source and generalizing them later on, we can use pub/sub from the start and save time. So rather than going back to the data source in an Ajax-based application and then generalizing them later, we just use a pub and sub method. So using observers, we can also easily separate applications wide notifications regarding different events down to whatever level of granularity we're comfortable with, something that can be less elegantly done using other patterns. So if we use this publish or subscribe pattern, we can easily separate the notification regarding different events to whatever granularity we're comfortable with. So we were able to like control those like callback. For example, that this we discussed where we want to like put the stateful logic in that callback handler. So notice how in our upcoming example, one topic notification is made when a user indicates that he wants to make a search query. Another is made when the request returns the actual data is available for consumption. So if the subscriber like indicate he wants to like subscribe, one notification is sent and another when the request returns the actual data. So this is how you configure the granularity. It's left up to the subscribers to then decide how to use knowledge of these events or the data returned. So it's now left to the subscribers, just like with pub and sub, to know how they will use that event. So it is using event, just like with the modern frameworks such as Flutter and React. They're not really processing the event in the front end. So they're listening from an event emitted from a database. So it is an application of that in the early JavaScript days. So the benefits of this are that if we wanted, we could have 10 different subscribers using the data returned in different ways. But as far as the Ajax layer is concerned, it doesn't care. So we can have like 10 different subscribers on the data, but as far as the Ajax application or the publisher is concerned, it doesn't care about who subscriber is. So its the sole duty is to request and return data and then pass it on to whoever wants to use it. This separation of concern can make the overall design of our code a little cleaner. So here we have form, two inputs, and then div. I'll just make the, I mean, I'll just make summarize this. So we have a form with an ID Flickr search with two inputs. With an next is div with an ID last query, and then OL with an ID search results, and then script with an ID result template, and then type text/HTML, then closing script. So this is the JavaScript code for Ajax. So it's an arrow function, and then inside is pre-compiled template and cache it using closure const result template equal underscore dot template parameter results template dot HTML. And then we have subscribe method, so parameter search tags, arrow function, last query dot HTML search for, and then another subscribe search/result, and then result with the return, or inside is that empty function, then that event parameter result template, and then submit our search query and publish tags on the /search/tags topic. This is the Flickr search that submit function, parameter then that prevent default, then const tags parameter this, then that find parameter query that file. If not tags, then return, then that publish parameters /search/tags comma trim tags. So subscribe to new tags being published and perform a search query using them. Once data is returned, publish this data for the rest of the application to consume. We use the destructuring assignment syntax that makes it possible to unpack values from data structures into the distinct variables. Now $sign.subscribe parameter search/tags, parameter comma tags, and then our function. Then inside is a .getJSON method. Then inside HTTP API Flickr, then tags, comma tag mode any format JSON. Then next is the destructuring assignment as function parameter. So we have items arrow function, if not items.length, then return, then shorthand property names in object creation. If variable name equal to object key, then $sign.publish /search/result comma parameter items, and then kind of like dependency array in React hooks, which is the jQuery. So observer pattern in React ecosystem. Now we're gonna deal with React, and then we stop here because this is where like we will discuss now the React, and then go back to JavaScript syntax, and then go back here to the JavaScript pattern. So observer pattern. So basically our plan would be to go back and master this JavaScript pattern in all of its details, and for us to be able to really understand the basics, because this is where the confusion with modern frameworks, this is actually where it came from. So this is the pattern that we're discussing. In the future videos with React, we will discuss more about the syntax. So now we understand how what actually problem it is trying to solve. Now we will gonna discuss in the future what are the tools that we can, or the tools that's available for us to be able to solve our problem. And of course, React will be included in that, because React is actually the front end. React is help us to solve the front end. So here, a popular library that uses the observable pattern in RxJS. The RxJS documentation states that ReactiveX combines the observer pattern with iterator pattern and functional programming with collections to fill the need for an ideal way of managing sequences of events. So these are RxJS is a ReactiveX combines the observer pattern with the iterator pattern and functional programming with collections to fill the need for an ideal way of managing sequences of events. So React use ReactiveX to use the observer pattern along with iterator pattern and functional programming with collections to fill the need to manage sequences. So it's the same with how we actually execute objects, or what's the objects under the hood. It's not as simple as just an heap or an heap like storage structure, or an array storage structure. It actually combination of multiple pattern. So it's the same with this. So the server pattern helps decouple several different scenarios in application design. So if you haven't been using it, I recommend picking up one of the pre-written implementation mentioned here and giving it a try. It's one of the easier design patterns to get started with, but also one of the most powerful. With RxJS, we can create observers and subscribe to certain events. Let's look at an example from their documentation, which logs whether a user was dragging in the document. Now this create is dragging observer and subscriber to that is dragging event via from event. Merge, sample, and map TO of RxJS. So using RxJS, we will create observer and subscriber. So this is the observer pattern. Sorry, publish and publish pattern. So here RxJS, we import from event and merge, and then we import React DOM, of course, because that's the entry point, as we will discuss in the next video. Import sample comma map2 from RxJS again, slash operators, then import style slash CSS, then so these are actually logging whether the user was dragging in the document. So this create is dragging observer and subscribe to that is dragging event via from event. So this from event is how we subscribe to that is dragging. That subscribe is dragging via from event, merge, sample, and map2. So not just from event but also merge, sample, here sample from event, and then map2. Here, that pipe to map2. So it's a simple code, but it actually does a lot. Now we'll go to React. So hello React. So in the past, websites and web applications were server rendered. When a user accesses a URL in a browser, a request was sent to a web server which returned an HTML file along with its associated CSS and JavaScript files. So that's what we discussed, which is the jQuery. Now after some network delay, the user would see the rendered HTML and could begin interacting with it. Each subsequent page transition repeated this process. In this model, the server handled most essential tasks, while the client played a minimal role, primarily rendering pages. A basic HTML and CSS structured and styled the application, while JavaScript, often in the form of jQuery, enabled interactions like toggling a drop-down or advanced styling, positioning a tooltip. So these are all the front-end type. So this is how we render the painting. In contrast, SPA frameworks shifted the focus from the server to the client. In SPAs, the server primarily delivers JavaScript over the network along with minimal HTML file. So in SPA, this is the important point here, is sending only a minimal HTML file as opposed to rendering HTML file in each request. So basically those bundled JavaScript in the browser, or the browser is now responsible for executing or manipulating the documents, because essentially HTML is just a JavaScript or being translated in JavaScript in the end. So before, we just don't have a tools that will allow us to combine the JavaScript and HTML. Now we have those tools that will allow us to compile that in the server and then send that JavaScript bundle in the front end, and the front end will just the one will structure the HTML, and CSS is a separate process which we will discuss in the next. So the browser executes the linked JavaScript files, rendering the entire application dynamically using HTML and CSS while relying on JavaScript for interactions. In its most extreme form, a user visiting a URL receives a small HTML file and a larger JavaScript file. So after a brief network and rendering delay, JavaScript renders the content in the browser. So of course, there will be a network and rendering delay because the browser are the one tasked for executing that bundled JavaScript file along with those previously HTML or multiple HTML files. Now essentially, HTML and the CSS file as well. An SPA is structured bundle of JavaScripts organized into folders and files, forming a complete application. An SPA framework like React provides the tools to architect this JavaScript-driven application. When a user visits a web application's URL, the JavaScript-based application is delivered once over the network. So from that point on, React or any other SPA framework takes over rendering everything in the browser as HTML and handling user interactions with JavaScript. So essentially, you have all of this code that you're compiling, and these all have the logic already, and then you're putting that once, and that JavaScript will take care of itself in the browser. So that's what's happening. Think about this like kind of like compiling a JavaScript code and then transferring it to a runtime, whether it's browser or in the case of TypeScript, you're actually compiling it to a Node.js where it is in the backend. So with React's rise, the concept of components became central. Each component encapsulates its visual and functional sorry, I just want to add this with an SPA, that's React, but another innovation that makes it complex is that the Next.js, which the combined front end and back end that use React, actually allows you to render some part of your application as an SPA, and then some is a hybrid, and then some is just rendered. So you have more granularity because of that innovation, and also Vercel like support or in close contact with that development. So that's why a lot of like web application are deployed in, or front-end web application are deployed in Vercel. Now with React's rise, the concept of components becomes central. Each component encapsulates its visual and functional aspects using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So as we will see in the moving forward, this HTML and JavaScript are compiled together. Now the CSS are kind of like a different thing when it is being executed on the browser, but they are all combined that form kind of like the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before. But now we're writing code imperatively. So declaratively, because it's easier. So once defined, components can be combined into a hierarchy to build a complete application. So once combined, those components will form a hierarchy or a tree of nodes or tree of components in React, or tree of elements, which we will also discuss, that form the actual application. So that tells the browser what's the structure of the page and what's the styling is and what logic it will support. So this is how we um, create a React project. So it's best to like create a React project with Vite because it doesn't interfere with the React actual feature, unlike with the Next.js, unlike with other option. So let's just keep it at that. CD hackers stories and CD hacker stories because like I think Next.js, I'm not sure. Yeah, Next.js and then other options are um, imposing something on React that restrict the usage of its features. So you need to comply with their rules, unlike with the Vite. So that's what it is. So CD hacker stories. So here we're creating like a boilerplate for a Vite project with the name hacker stories, and then we're gonna do go to that folder and then npm install and npm run dev, then npm install react at latest underscore react underscore dom at latest. So this react dom is very important. Is This is what enables the single page application that we talked about, that one html or like minimal html that spawns like a javascript, a beast javascript. And npm install save dev at type slash react at latest, and then at type slash react dash dom at latest. So this will be the project structure in VS Code. So hacker stories, node dash modules, public, Vite. So we will discuss that in the next videos.